and we're going to go from there. All right. Thanks everybody for being here. We're here to discuss, or really, Mike and I are here to answer any of your questions as related to scheduling piece and or the RPI. I just want to state right off the bat that we have, let me just scroll over to this really quickly. We have about half, which I'm kind of surprised. We only have about half of our schools responding so far, actually less than half. So we are still looking for a number of forms to be returned. If you think you sent yours in and you want to check with me after that, that's fine. I do want to kind of go through how I'm gonna proceed first. Right now, as it stands right now, we have roughly 80% of our schools have opted. Actually, I should say roughly 80% of our sports have opted for the 80%, while about 20% have opted for one of those three options within 50%. So what I plan to do is on Monday, I plan to communicate with all of our athletic directors just to make sure that I have it correct, to make sure I'll just take Barrington in football because they're the first one listed, just to confirm that Barrington does indeed want 80% in football. Because once I want to make sure that there's no errors there, because once I start to make these schedules, it's going to be, it would be very difficult to go back in and change one team. I'd have to basically restart the entire division, which could also impact other divisions with crossover games. So, I'm going to make sure we have everything right on Monday, just through email, and I'll call people afternoon time if I need to get people's responses just to make sure everybody's okay. And the other thing is, I'm just going to back up for a second. It is vitally important that we have a response from every single school by Monday. I'm sorry, by Friday. This Friday, the 9th, is the deadline for that form. I cannot do a thing without all 54 schools responding. So it's going to be vitally important that we have a sheet from everybody. And like I said, on Monday morning, I will be working to just confirm everybody's through email what their selections are in each of those 5 sports: football, boys soccer, girls tennis, and girls volleyball. It'll just be a quick confirmation that will go out. I'll ask for a response by noon. Anybody I don't hear from, I'll probably start out with text messages and then move on to phone calls, just so that, again, when we move on to the schedule portion of this, we have everybody accounted for. All 54 schools are accounted for. And then second of all, within each school, we have a declaration or a request for their schedule amount. So that's how I'm going to proceed. That's how we're going to proceed. If anybody sees any problems with that, please let me know. But besides that, we're really here today to answer your questions, no matter how small or big they may be. So I'd like to kind of unless Mike has something to add. Mike, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, just one thing, getting back to that whole the urgency about getting back those forms from everybody. I don't know where everybody stands on this call, but again, we're going to communicate that out. But it's vital for us, especially in this first year, because it's going to impact every single school if we don't have responses, because it's going to hold up the scheduling process, and people need to go out and get games and different things like that. So I think at some point, if we don't hear anything from a school, even after us reaching out, we're going to have to make a determination, probably just to give everybody for that school 80% and just move on, because it's going to be that important for us to not delay the process of scheduling. So that's the only thing I wanted to add.
Thank you, Mike. Rick?
Yeah, okay. I'm new at this, so I mean, I've been coached a long time, but new at this. So I saw it's either 50%, we do, the scheduling gives the league representatives from Connecticut and Mass, or we do the 80%. But you mean 80% like our regular schedule you've been giving us, or we make up the other 20%?
That's correct. So you would only, the highest you can get is that 80%. So in a sport like soccer,
Yep.
hold on.
Well, just think of it this way, Ricky. Just think of it this way. If we were giving you a 100% of the league games, right? And you
Yeah.
have the ability to go out and get some non-league games. You're still going to have the ability to go out and get those non-league games, but of the league games, we're only going to give you 80%.
Okay.
So for instance, Rick, that form says for soccer, you have to get to 16 games. So we're
Yep.
going to give you 80% of that 16. We're going to give you 13 games. If you choose the 80%, we're going to give you 13 games, which means you and everybody else in the state has to get 3 on your
Yep.
own versus whatever school, whether it's in your division, up a division, down a division, or out of state, you
Do
can get
whatever you want.
whatever games you want to fill those 3 that fit
Okay.
your school.
And those will count now. So if you play outside of your division, those games that you get to the remaining 20%, say, those would count towards your playoff qualification.
Yeah, so you have to be careful when you play. I remember when I was at Hendrick and hockey, man, CM and all them, that would count towards their record if they chose teams that were, high caliber. So, and that's fine. So basically, it's 80% of 50 is no more 100% scheduling. That's it. You're giving teams, the ADs flexibility to do some of their own scheduling then.
Correct.
Exactly.
Okay.
What are the questions? What are the questions? And again, part of the reason I wanted to offer this today was because I felt like, and the coaches' questions were great, and but they were very specific to that sport. So I just wanted to provide this here today to see if, I kind of felt like the we did this ass backwards, and we should have probably done an athletic director only meeting first, and then came back with the whole meeting but I didn't really anticipate that the coaches were going to monopolize most of the time. And again, those questions were needed. They were helpful, I'm sure, but we just wanted to provide this for the athletic directors to make sure that, because it's really important that you're comfortable with this. Maybe not happy with it, but comfortable with it.
Tom, the majority of coaches for me all ask the same question. How are we determining what's the non-league, what's league? And then what's the benefit to playing a team that's above you as opposed to a team that is below you? Because, there are going to be some programs that are going to look to find the holes in everything so that it's that benefit to them.
So I'll answer the first one. And Alex, I'll just use volleyball as an example, okay? So volleyball, the sport committee has said that volleyball, you have to get to 16 games in order to be eligible for the playoffs. So if you schedule if you take the 80% and you have those 13 games, you have to schedule 3 additional league games. Once you hit 16, okay, and I think off the top of my head, I think the game cap is 20. It is. So game cap is 20. So those remaining 4 games can be any combination of league or non-league. Okay? And you have to designate on Our School Today schedule which are league and non-league by August 1st for the fall. So you can't go into the season and change them. Once they're designated, that's it. So you have to designate by August 1st. And any out-of-state competition, we need an out-of-state competition form. And that's really to determine exactly, and this is not going to be every year. So Alex, give me a school that's right over the border in Massachusetts that you might play in volleyball.
Case.
Case? Okay. So if you play Case in the fall of 2024 in volleyball, we're going to place that school into a certain division, into one of our divisions. Once we do that once, there's really not a need to do it every single year because they're probably not changing all that much. So this is not going to be the out of state competition form is not something that's going to happen every year for every opponent. It's just going to happen a lot this year, and then in following years, it will just be the same unless somebody's applying for a change. So, but to answer your question directly, you can play in volleyball, you could play 20 league games. And you could play various divisions, out of state opponents, but you would just have to do that prior to the season by August 1st. And then the way that I'll explain the piece about playing up a division or down a division is you shouldn't be scheduling, and I know that this is not the question, but you should be scheduling teams that you want to play. If you want to challenge yourself and go up a division, whether you're choosing 50 or 80%, go up and play a few teams at the bottom of that higher division, or go play a regional team. I had a soccer coach from West Warwick ask me yesterday, if I don't get a certain school in my division, can I go schedule them? Of course you can, if they're a neighbor. Just make your schedule philosophically what you want it to be, because for the most part, everybody's schedule is going to be very similar, especially if you're choosing that 80%. Those extra 3 games are not going to do that much to your RPI where it's going to be able to swing it. But in general, you should be looking for opponents that are competitive, that are going to be quality opponents. And then the only other thing that's going to affect your RPI is winning games. So there's those 2 components to the RPI, okay? And the first one is your own record. So if you lose to a team, you won't earn any of that team's points. But your strength of schedule is not determined by winning. Your strength of schedule is just determined by how strong your opponents are. So if you're a Division II team and you lose to a Division I team, you're not going to earn any points on the win-loss, which is 60%, but you are going to win. You are going to earn strength of schedule points, which means it's not going to be like earning 0 for the game. You're still going to get points. It's just not going to be as much as if you had beaten that team.
Now, in response to Alex, I read that part on your I don't know, your formula.
Yep.
So obviously, if you beat them and you play up, like Alex said, you play up and you beat them, you're gonna get more points. But no matter what, you're gonna get some kind of rating for every game you play that's not within the limited game. So it could affect you down the road.
Yeah, so playing up and playing down could affect you. The other thing that we did do, Alex, is we've expanded the playoffs. So in Division I, with the exception of football and hockey, in Division I, we're going to take 80% of the teams. So it's, we're taking a vast majority of teams into the playoffs. So it's really not going to determine, if you quote unquote, miss schedule as an athletic director or a coach, and you make a misstep in scheduling, it's not going to cost you a playoff berth. It might cost you the 7th, between the 7th or the 8th seed, but it's certainly not going to cost you getting into the playoffs. And we've done that specifically to address that point. We could see less teams making the playoffs in the future, but that's going to be, something for a day down the road.
I have a question. Good afternoon. What happens if a team cannot get to the specific amount of games required to participate in postseason? So I take 80% and say soccer, I get 12 out of 16. Say I can only come up with 3 non-league games. Would that exclude us? 3 other league games. What if we only play 15 games and 16 are required? What happens then?
So my question is, did you want to play 16?
Of course we want, of course, we want to play the required to make the playoffs, but what if we can't schedule enough games? What if we can't find teams
I
to
got
fill out our league schedule?
So,
You
so
know-
I just want to say something first. If you were a small school and you wanted to play less than the required number of games to make the playoffs, you could do that. You could schedule 14, 12, 10 games. That's one of the things that we like about this is the fact that you can do that. You don't have to play a minimum number of games. You just have to play a minimum number of games to make the playoffs. So the question, I think, is going to be moot because at the very least, we're going to get into if we have people who are having trouble filling schedules, Marty, we are going to schedule those scheduling days here, where we're going to ask whether you have a full schedule or not. We are going to make it mandatory for one person per school to, let's just take girls soccer. We're going to say we need, hold on. In girls soccer, we need 46 school representatives, one representative from every school to be at the Interscholastic League at a specific date and time.
Yeah.
And nobody's leaving until everybody has a full schedule. And now that might mean that a team has to take on a 17th game in order to get Cumberland High School to 16, or a team might have to take on an 18th game to get Cumberland High School to 16. But we're not going to leave until everybody has the required number of games. So that's the fail safe at the end.
Thank you.
So what we'll do is we're going to release the schedule as the 50 and 80% schedule with dates. We'll give people time to fill the schedule on their own. And then we will check in with everybody. And if we need to, we will schedule, I keep using the word schedule. We will arrange for a scheduling day here in the office where everybody from a specific sport has to have a representative, whether it's a coach or an athletic director, in order to fill that schedule.
Thank you.
Hey, Tom.
Justin, then Greg. Yep.
I mean, I have enough girls for girls soccer, and I might have to co-op. I don't want to submit something and then screw everything up if I don't have the girls. I'm going to the middle school to do signups this week, and I know what I have coming back in the pipeline is not many. So,
Well, I mean,
what do I do
Justin,
in that case?
we're gonna have to deal with co-ops continually. So we'll adjust. And you know, especially in our first year here, we're not going to, you know, God forbid Johnston has to drop the program. We're not going, you know, we're gonna try our hardest, whatever that happens. But this is, you know, we're gonna try our hardest, but we're not gonna say, oh, sorry, you know, Johnston canceled out on you. You were playing Johnston twice. You only have 14 games and now you're screwed. We're never going to say that to an opponent.
Justin, let's talk about that offline a little bit, all right?
But we're gonna,
See if we can
yeah,
help you out.
it's, yeah, we're gonna have to, there's gonna be some, always gonna be some, you know, we're not dealing with widgets here. You know, we're dealing, you know, no Spacely sprockets. We're dealing with kids, we're dealing with programs, and we're always gonna do so in the best interest of those kids. So when we get thrown curveballs like that, or, you know, we just communicated with the new athletic director at Block Island, Rob Kloster, and he's trying to really do a lot of great things there. Rob was the athletic director before. And so right now we're editing Division III baseball and Division IV softball. So we do that, you know, on a regular basis, and we'll continue to do so if we have co-ops that increase or decrease the size of our leagues. Greg?
Okay.
I just have a couple questions as it pertains to the out-of-state aspect of it.
Okay.
Are there limitations to how many out-of-state games you can have per season? So could you, if you choose 50% of your schedule, could teams schedule 50% of teams out of state?
Right now, we do not have a limit. No, we have not input a limit. So right now, if you have 50%, if you opt for 50% of your schedule, The other 50% can be against out-of-state teams. So we don't have a limit right now, no.
My second part of that question is, so when we schedule out-of-state games, can you just explain, I'm looking at your sheet here, so default divisions, so if you have 1,500 plus students, that's Division I. What if you are going against a private school such as like a Zavarian, and are they considered a D3 school if they have 700 boys? Or how does that work?
So the initial answer is yes. So the initial answer is that if you come to us with Zavarian and they have if they have 700 total students and they're male and female, we would initially pop them into Division III. But then the last question on that page, and I think you can all see it. Greg, can you see it?
Yep.
The last question is basically, do you want to protest or change, or are you asking us to change their division? And then on this second page, and you can see it's not done yet, but on this second page, we would just need the school. Like if you have Zavarian and you think they're a Division I program, you would just need to provide us with some information as to why you think, like some data as to why you think Zavarian should be in a different division. And Mike and I have contacts in the other states at the CIAC in Connecticut and the MIAA to determine where that team would be fitting.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that's the other part of that, is that, you can't just put something down and then it's automatically gonna go to what it is. We would have some type of confirmation with the other state.
And that would,
So-
and Greg, that would only be if you're asking for it to be a league game. If you're asking it for it to be non-league and not count against the RPI, then we don't even, it's a moot point. But I'm sorry, go ahead.
So would that work in the opposite? So let's say a border school for like Lincoln, like Attleboro is a big school, but perhaps one of their girls' team is not as good. So say we play them in girls soccer or whatever it might be. Are they considered a Division I program, even though they wouldn't really be a Division I program in Rhode Island? Or how
It
does
would,
that
it
work?
would have to work both ways.
So Greg, it's the same thing. That state association sometimes calls our office.
Yeah.
To get confirmation. So again, I mean, it's not everybody's rules are not consistent across all states as far as how they do it, how they classify schools and different things like that. But there's communication.
I guess my question is there going to be a list of out-of-state teams and what division they fall in prior to us scheduling games? Are all the athletic directors across the state going to be able to see that Zavarian's a Division I team, Attleboro's a Division III team,
Well,
whatever?
But Mike, I think what Greg is asking is, I don't think we have the ability to do that, Greg. I think what Greg is asking is, are we going to have a list of all Massachusetts and Connecticut teams and how their individual
How
sports
they're classified.
fall into us?
Yeah, we'll be able to have a list of the classifications of the other states.
No, Greg is asking how they're going to fit into our scale.
Right.
No, that's good. No, we'll have that. No, because we're not going to be able to determine every single school in every other state and how they would classify here.
But as you go through, like if you schedule, and I'm sorry, what was the school you just named that was very big?
Attleboro.
If you schedule Attleboro, we will go through the MIAA and and work with the MIAA to determine where they're going to be. And then that information, once they're determined to be a division, they might be school size wise a Division I team, and we might have to say in girls soccer, they're a Division II team. That will go out to the schools.
Greg, I think, I guess the best way to answer the question is that I think the school has to do their due diligence, just like when Massachusetts schools are trying to play us, they do their due diligence to find out the strength of a program, before you make those. So if you're considering as a league game, I think you have to take those things into consideration too.
Yeah, and that's where my concerns kind of come in a little bit with the out-of-state stuff. So more so, if schools are scheduling 50% of their games out of state, we're essentially, for some schools, potentially creating prep school schedules. So, I mean, you could have teams leaving Rhode Island for weeks at a time to go play, tournaments in Florida or whatever. And now those games are happening, and you're
Yeah.
trying to figure out who these teams in Georgia and Florida or how they match up in Rhode Island in your situation.
Look, Greg,
So,
I know what you're saying, and I guess not to debate it on this call, but I don't think that that's gonna happen. And if it does, then we'll have a mechanism to deal with it. So, you
Yeah.
know, I just don't think we're gonna be able to solve that going into the process. But if you look at how other states handle that, the likelihood of that, people going 50% of the schedule out of state is gonna be very, very low. But if it is, and it becomes an issue, then obviously we can deal with that.
okay.
Not going to that length, but have you guys had discussions with Connecticut and Mass about relaxing their requirements for all out-of-state games to be counted as league games? That always prevents them from playing us sometimes.
Well, we can't control what they do, but we've had a lot of conversations with them, about their standards and everything like that. So we certainly couldn't demand it, but I think they are excited that for a long time, as you know, right, when we played those games, it just didn't count for us, but it always counted for the other team. And so I think they're a lot happier now that they're skinning the game on both ends. Because again, when things, this is where things become important with scheduling as well too, is that you can't be casual about canceling games either, right? So if you designate that as a league game, you got to make sure that Massachusetts school or Connecticut school is gonna honor that. So that, and again, that's where we can help with some things too. If you're having problems with the school, we can communicate with that state association to help out too. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's going to evolve. I guess that's the best way to put it, Alex. It's going to take some time, to see if we can get some consistency. But I think just like we're saying that opening up those out-of-state games is going to help our state, I think they view it the same way too, because sometimes schools have a hard time finding competitive games.
And Alex, I think one of the things that Mike and I talked about internally recently is, and I think this goes to the heart of your issue, is we need to figure out when Massachusetts and Connecticut teams schedule Rhode Island, how are those state associations categorizing our schools? What is their bar? What is their evaluation process? We just need to figure that out so that we can then communicate that back to say that when you go into Connecticut, you're going to be judged this way, and you're going to be put into divisions this way. Because I think part of your point is that sometimes they're only, like for a school like East Providence, sometimes they're only looking at population when you go into Massachusetts, and that is not allowing those schools. You might be too good for your population, and therefore they don't want to schedule the game because it's going to count against them if they lose. So I think part of our responsibility here in the league office is to understand how those two states are going to categorize Rhode Island schools, because we need to be able to communicate that back to the membership.
Sure. I mean, for us, it was always, we would always play Bishop Feehan, and then, they couldn't play us anymore because they weren't winning, and it was really affecting them. And then, we had a relationship with Durfee also basketball wise, and that kind of fell apart as well. So, the out-of-state games, the kids get excited for. It's also, good to do the home and aways and create those series. And, I think that would be nice to add in for a lot of the schools that are on the borders, or just somebody who's just looking for a change. So anything that would come from them, I think would be beneficial to everybody in Rhode Island.
Guys, one more question. So if we have a sport like boys or girls soccer, and it's kind of split. So you have, half the division choosing 50 and half choosing 80. And I know the data you got right now says more likely it's 80% schedules, but are you going to have scenarios where you're going to have multiple teams that they choose 80% schedules, they're playing each other twice and you have other teams that don't play those teams at all? Or how is that gonna work if there's kind of a split with 80 and 50?
So I think, so I can't say 100%, but my goal is to first, so if you had, let's just say in Division I boys soccer, all right? Let's just use that as an example. In Division I boys soccer, you have, well, it's 15 teams, but let's just say you had those 15 teams. If you have 8 and 7, the first thing I would do in scheduling is make sure that those 8, the 8 that choose 80% and the 7 that choose 50% have those opponents. So it would be, so we would match up those two groups first. So we would make sure that we're gonna cut down on the number of duplicates, on the number of home and aways in one year that we have. So all the 80% would play all the 50% right off the bat. And then from there, we would start with internally with the 80% and internally with the 50%. But like you said, right now, I mean, I can tell you right now in boys soccer, I have 17 responses and I only have 2 requests for 50% out of 17. So it's 15. It's the vast majority of those schools in boys soccer right now, 15-2 are choosing 80%. So I can't say that that won't happen, but I think that it's, I only have, I think right now, I don't even think I have 50% returned. I think I have 17 or maybe 18 returned forms. In boys soccer, it happens to be 17. And like I said, it's 15 choosing 80% and 2 choosing 50%. Marty, was your question about out-of-state teams getting placed answered? Okay.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yep. What other questions are there out there? All right, I'm gonna shut the Greg, you got one more?
Yeah, sorry, one more. This relates to field hockey.
Okay.
In like the Division II and Division III, if you have to play each other 3 times and people choose kind of a 50%, how does that work?
So
If
I
you can't-
removed field hockey from so everybody's getting just what's there. And so
Okay.
field hockey's not choosing between 80 and 50%. I think it's going to be very similar when we do girls hockey. I think when we move on to girls hockey, we're just going to have to say, how many, does everybody want to play everybody twice for 14 games and then say, okay, you need to go get 4. I think we're likely to do something like that next year, with girls hockey, and field hockey is in much the same. And I think, it might even be boys hockey might even be the same, where there's not a choice. It's just a set number. And then you have to go get additional games. And that's mainly, again, field hockey is removed from the requirements to do everything according to the rules because of the low number of teams. I think 3 years ago, we had 21 or 22 teams, and we're now down to 17. So there's really a need in field hockey to be very specific, so we're maximizing participation, and I think that's what the sport committee did very well. So we're just going to stick with, I think it's 12 or 15 games, 12 in Division I, 15 in Division II, and 15 in Division III. That's just going to be the schedule. But going back to Marty's question, that might be a sport where we need a scheduling day because those Division I teams can't find games, and we might need to get them to the 14. Even though it's only 2, we might need to find them opponents, either through a scheduling day or through me contacting schools and saying, hey, Division II, will you take this one game versus North Kingstown?
Tom, I just have a quick question and or a concern that I'm hoping that you and Mike can allay. And that is I am concerned about girls tennis and boys tennis being part of this 80-50, just particularly girls tennis, where other states aside from New York don't play girls tennis in the same season that we do. How are we going to find out of state competition for them that isn't cost prohibitive for schools? How are we going to increase or accomplish the goals that the league has set forth for our sports if girls tennis is included in this?
So I will say right off the bat, that I personally did not know when we started this, that Massachusetts and Connecticut were not full girls tennis boys in the spring. So, but I do think that we'll in us like in, and I'll just tell you right now, in girls tennis, I have 13 schools responding of, I think, if I'm not mistaken, there's 40 teams playing girls tennis. So I only have those 13 right now. But a greater percentage, 4, have asked for the 50%. So I think that in girls tennis, there is a need, or that schools are seeing a need for it. Yeah, 40 teams. So there are 40 teams, and we already have 4 that have asked for 50%. And I think, I hate to keep repeating the same answer, but I think tennis might be a sport with the lack of out-of-state opponents where we are forced to have that scheduling meeting and possibly just assign a few more games. So right now we have 9 teams asking for 80%. We have 2 teams asking for a straight 50, and we have 2 teams asking for a 50% and with playing a lower division. So right now, I would stick with the 80 and 50, then with the possibility of having to assign additional games at a later date if we get to the point where we can't get voluntary movement anymore. We might just have to assign, but we're not. I think the point is, in none of these sports are we just going to put it back on you, Vin, or anybody else, the schools, to say, oh well, it's up to you.
I appreciate that, Tom, very much.
So
Thank
I
you.
mean, it's just going to be, again, Mike and I have put a lot of thought into this, but as with anything, this is, we're not going to have all of the solutions. If our schools need something additional to support them, that's what we're here to do. We want the flexibility. We like the flexibility that 50% gives to people, because even if we went straight enrollment, there's going to be a ton of people that needed this 50%. So, we're not just going to turn this over because anybody who fails at scheduling, it's our failure. So we have 56 opportunities to fail here times 5 sports. And so we're taking that as our charge to make sure that we're supporting our member schools to get where they want to be with the schedule. All right, so I'm gonna stop the recording. I don't see many other questions.